Awesome. Have you ever gotten into have a guest that sits in your chair and they want their hair cut short and you end up cutting it 6 times? Or maybe you just aren't really sure where to start. They bring you an inspirational picture and you're like, that's really cute, but I'm not quite sure how to get that look. Well, today we're going to talk all about Pixie's shorter haircuts and give some great technical things that you can be able to work with to help customize them for every single guest. I'll give you some styling tips as well, how to finish them out, or some of my favorite stylers, and we're going to have some fun doing it. So, before I begin sharing the PowerPoint or any information, what I want to know from you guys is what is your greatest challenge when you're doing a short haircut? Don't be shy, just unmute yourself and share away if there's something. Or it could be one thing you want to get out of today's class. Who's brave? Nobody's being brave this morning. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started then. If you think of something, just throw it in the chat box, or you can share it with me later as well. So presenter view for all of you, maintain on mute, and here we go. So in the world of surface, we believe that there's only 5 haircuts in the whole wide world. You have your long one length, you have long layers, you have a short bob line, you have inverted lines, and then you also have short layers. We give them fancy names so that we have something to sell, which makes it also an easy topic when we're in the salon. We can communicate with other stylists, or we have something to then be able to look for and be consistent in the haircuts to come. So again, we believe that there's only 5 haircuts in the whole wide world. Trends are the exaggeration within these 5 core cuts. And through consultation, we define personal image, we consider hair type, facial shape, body structure, personality too. And then we also individualize the core cut for the perfect look. Working with the surface system inspires creation and enables recreation. We have fun and we work with passion. And we use tools that are respecting our personal health as well, and that can be able to be an extension of our hands to be able to create endless amounts of design. And I'll share some of those with you also today. So the classic haircuts that we work within are going to be the edge, which is your long one length, long layers, which is freedom. You have your windswept line, which would be your bob line, and then front and center inverted lines and the crop, which are short layers. The front and center and the crop are the two that we're going to work within today, so you're going to hear a lot about those. Some of the things that you're going to hear me talk about when we're working through these cuts is working through our head zones, which would be green zone, top of the head, black zone, the crown area, blue zone, which is going to be the back of the head, and also the temples and behind the ears, which are going to be your red zone. And those are the areas that are most sparse because usually they're the thinnest area, where because of the ear space, of course, we don't have any hair there to hold on to that length. So we need to pay close attention to those areas. Whenever I'm working with a target parting, what I'm doing is I'm taking 2 points and now I'm going ahead and meeting them in the middle. So it makes for great parting just by placing my finger, dropping my comb, and drawing that comb to my finger. When we look at the high point of the head, what I'm looking for is where that comb balances on top of the head, and that would be my high point. We also start looking for our side and rear ridges just by simply taking our comb in and tipping it in. Or if I have 2 combs, I can actually cross one on top, one on the side, and where they meet when they tip down is going to be where my side and rear ridge live. Now, why that becomes very important is because if I cut too many layers above or below, it can really alter the shape of the head. That being said, we can also customize a haircut based on the shape of the head shape that we're working with, being able to take more weight out or leave more weight behind. And people will ask me all the time, they're like, do you measure the head when you're cutting? And I actually do, maybe not with a measuring tape and very, official, but I do like to make sure I know exactly where my ridge lines are, because that will make or break the haircut. And then again, always kind of following the rules. And then once you learn how all the rules, then you can easily break them where you need to customize. In the nape sectioning, we're going to work with both arc partings today and then also straight partings. So in your arc shape, when we work with that, we're working more in our front and center, which we'll be sharing with you today. And when I do that, that arc shape usually follows right where the comb leaves the head, so right in about that occipital bone, and then it usually comes down into the ear. And one of the biggest struggles I see when people are trying to get that longer line in the front is that they start too straight in the back of the head, and then they're trying to use that little bit of width on the side to really tip down that length. So that length needs to come from the back of the head, and that becomes super important. Your horizontal lines typically are going to be found in the edge, the freedom, the windswept. And the crop, we usually will design all the interior length, and then we'll go around and work through the perimeter. Now, 6 of the core principles that we work with surface are going to be always cutting with your end result in mind. So that's one thing that's super important, because I need to have a vision of what that cut is going to look like at the end. And with that, then I can create my roadmap and I can create my plan to be able to execute it. Always cut in the direction that you want the hair to move. One of the most common things we see is that when we work with, say, a bob line, many times you see someone cut front back to front on one side, and then they turn around and they cut front to back on the opposite side. One side will work really well, and the other side may start to flip back because it's been pushed to that direction. And so when we really think about what direction do we want that hair to flow and move, that's really going to help us create that perfect look. And we have the old joke of the guest comes in and they say, this side lays really well and this side doesn't lay well, it likes to flip up. And we say, do you sleep on that side? Have you taken any medication, or should you be medicated? I don't know. But really, it's kind of a funny thing that happens, because we learn that back, in our core education, when we're a young stylist, and somewhere it comes up, do you sleep on that side? And I found that to be amusing. I don't know where I learned that from, but it was a question I asked very often in the beginning of my career. Short hair pushes long away. So anywhere where there's short hair that helps to hold up the longer hair, that's going to help push, hold up, and direct the hair in the way we want it to move. Elevation softens the outer weight line, and the elevation higher than where the hair lives leaves no weight line. So what that means is, as I start to draw the hair to a 45-degree angle, I have to at some point create length. So I'm elevating, and then as I start to bring that rest of the hair to that line, it creates weight at that length. But if I continue to elevate and elevate and elevate, I'm going to end up creating layers. Over direction creates weight and length in the opposite direction. So as we over direct the hair, you have that weight and length that lays in the opposite direction. So it saves the weight. And the last one is extremely important when we start talking about pixie haircuts or really short looks, is that disconnection creates collapse of the weight of the layers above the disconnection. And so, for instance, if I took my hair and I cut this short underneath, this hair would then collapse and lay flatter to the head. So anywhere when we're cutting shorter looks, a lot of times we get really puffy around the hair above the ear. And you can only go so short before you end up with that mushroomy shape. So working with disconnection has become very important whenever we're working with shorter cuts. So the areas of a haircut, the line on the outer perimeter where you see that little zigzag is going to be your outer perimeter. The inner perimeter is the horseshoe that comes through that top that line that you see, and that's all your layers. When we look at the actual interior, the interior is anywhere I cut shorter length or frame within the hair. So anything inside that haircut is going to be what we call the interior. That's your framework. That's what holds the hair up. And the perimeter cutting options, we bevel up, we bevel under. We won't see a whole lot of that today, but it is very, if I want to have fringe or something that kind of flips up as more of a shag, I may still use that beveling up or beveling under. Swing cutting we'll see when we work through our front and center. And then also going into our inner perimeter, our layer map, and we typically will work with the black zone first, then connect to the green zone, and then we connect into the blue zone all the way around and the red. You see descending layers helps knuckles to the head, and we take weight away. Progressive is palm to the head, where we're leaving weight and length in the opposite direction, and then concave layers create more of that S shape or a question mark. Hair textures are going to determine whether or not we use a scissor or we use a razor. The straighter the hair is, the more I want to use a razor because I want to soften the hair and help to give it more movement. As it becomes wavy, that follicle begins to come more oblong, curly, more I should say wavy, more oval, curly, more oblong. And then as we get into spiral hair, it starts to become very flat. With that, the hair can become very skinny and very thin. And so we typically will work more firm on that end of the kinky hair, whereas straight hair, we want to cut it to a finer end to help create movement and texture and softness. When we get to that kinkier coily hair, we may choose to use our scissor, not because the razor is bad for it, but because it just doesn't give a firm enough line on the outer edge. The Surface Smooth Edge titanium razor that we're going to be using today is working with a flexible blade. So it works with a silicone guard that helps to keep conditioning in the hair. There's no tearing or bending or pulling on the hair whatsoever. And we get more wear on the blade. So each of those blade or sides of the blade are beveled at a 45-degree angle, allowing us that softness. We can also be able to bevel the hair under easily, bevel it up easily. And I can also use both sides of my blade. So I'll get a good 4 to 5 haircuts on one side, and then after I flip it, I get another 4 to 5 haircuts, depending, of course, on the hair that I'm working with. Your swivel shears we're going to talk about today as well. We have the traditional swivel, as well as we have the contour swivel and the RZ blenders. At this time, we don't have a clipper, but that's always an option to keep in your arsenal of tools when you're working with really, really short cuts, of course. I'll be working with my TK2 comb, which I do love these, and was a comb junkie when before I came to Surface. I had one comb that was it. That was all I would ever use. And I bought them by the box full because that was the comb I liked. And so it was, when you get a new comb, it's like driving a new car because it's different for you. And I came to find that I really love this one for multiple reasons. Number one, it's a carbon fiber comb. It is longer than the traditional comb, more that of a barber, but it does give you 8.26 inches to work with. So you have more cutting room to move around the head. You have your finer teeth on one edge, your wider teeth on the opposite, and a diamond polished tooth across the top. So what this does allows me to comb the hair without any scraping or scratching on the head. So it's absolutely perfect for that. And it also has this great parting tooth on the edge, which is great for parting, as well as, believe it or not, I actually highlight sometimes with this comb. So I get a lot of great use out of it. And it has a perfect balance point right in the center that actually helps me to drop less combs. That is a challenge I have on occasion or often. And then of course we have our clips. So today we're going to be working with some blunt cutting as well with our shear, and then we're also going to work with a deep shatter and soft shatter. So we're going to work with some different edges so that we can create some different looks. But one thing to share is that when we choose to cut blunt with the shear first, we always run that risk of not being able to soften it as much as if I went to use my razor first. It's easier to create a softer edge with the razor, and if I needed to, I could firm it up. But my blunt edge, once I've done that, it is harder to break it up. So it just depends on what you're working with. However, there are also a way to cut the hair so that when you use the scissor, you're still creating softness as you move. So you'll notice that I cut underneath my hand and I allow the walking of the shear so that when I cut, I'm not just cutting a straight blunt edge. I'm not going to go through these techniques because we're going to be learning a lot of them today as we work through the haircuts, but you have a lot of different techniques that can be able to help create different looks for your guest or customize it. Horizontal framing or vertical framing, creating that softness within that interior that we talked about. Sculpting or piecing, really taking that piece of hair and really sculpting it out so that we can be able to create that separation. Upblending we'll use today when we work through our front and center, and then also weave cutting, as well as possibly a little pinwheel. I probably won't do that today, but it is a technique that we use on longer hair quite often, and we will see some walking of the shear. Rules for facial shape. Parallel lines attract, so anything I create straight across or straight down is going to close in a space. So working with movement that is directional or arc shapes, that allows to create more softness. I can also create more illusion of opening up a space. Just taking a line and either coming straight across or tipping that line down, even if it's just the slightest, can soften or strengthen a jawline. If I have someone who is very, very soft in the jaw and very short like me, whenever I take any sort of angle, it helps to elongate that jaw. If the jaw is really strong and really sharp, if I horizontal line will help to soften it and kind of pull it back in. And this works the same in our shorter haircuts when we're working up and around the ear. If I have really strong features and I want to soften them, I can take a straight line across. If I have really soft features that I want to elongate, I can still take that line in front of the ear softer or even more so exaggerated. Creating space above the eye. Even if you take a look at my eyes, when we look at anyone, no one is symmetrical. They're very, most of us have a lot of asymmetry in our facial features. So you may have one eye that sits a little higher than the other. And we can do two things with that. We can exaggerate something and really bring attention to it, or we can soften it by creating space over the other eye. The lower eye will then help create more balance. So depending on what you're trying to create, if your guest is really outgoing and they love that higher eye to really stand out, create more space over that open eye. Let it really open out. For me, I do tend to have one eye that's just slightly higher than the other, and by opening up that space, I create more balance across my brow line. So I love taking a look at these pictures here, and every time I see them, I've probably seen them hundreds of times throughout the years. And I love sharing them because there's so much we can learn from them. And when you take a look at this woman's face. She's got beautiful eyes. She has really nice, strong cheekbones, beautiful lips. How can we be able to accentuate them as we come into a shorter haircut? Really being able to open up the eyes, being able to draw some softness through the cheekbones to help bring them out, creating more space and helping to bring that line a little bit softer so that we can soften the jawline. So we always look at the things where we have those positive features, and then from there, let's soften the negatives. How can we change that? And then here as well, another great look to be able to take a look at, having that parallel fringe and a really straight line really closes her in. So how can we open that up and help to soften that squareness that we might see? When you take a look here, you can see the asymmetry. Opening up the eye really helps to create balance. That asymmetrical side on that angle helps to lengthen that jawbone, really giving her some softness through the opposite side, helping to bring out those eyes. Just a really great visual to be able to see them. So we're going to be taking and getting into our cutting right away. But what I do want to do here is I want to open this up to any questions or thoughts that you may have had, or areas where you're going, yeah, now I know this might be an area where I really want to tap into. Anything at all? You guys are so quiet this morning, Monday morning. Just a quick, how many of you have taken a core cutting class with Surface at one point? So a good few of you. Yeah, okay. So in the fall, I'm excited because in November, we're going to have a full day of core cutting that will be virtual. So I'll be taking you through a full day of hair cutting. So if that's something that you haven't done with us, or if you know somebody who hasn't yet, that's a great one to be able to take, help get you some hands-on into the world of the surface cutting. So with that, let's go ahead and get ourselves started. Again, if there's anything you want to share in the chat box, go for it. So when we take a look at the front and center and kind of thinking in the process of the pixie cut, these are some pictures that came to mind as well. And you can see there's different little bits of angles. You have some that have a little bit more layers, that bottom right corner. In the front left side here, you have a little bit of asymmetry, and you can see some shorter disconnection underneath where it's shorter under the ear. The one on the top right, very more classic of a front and center, but there really is, some nice shape there that happens, that taper in the neck. And I thought with that separation in the front was super cute way to look at it. When we look at our front and center, we're going to begin in the nape area. We're going to begin by working in that occipital bone, creating a nice arc shape, and we work in vertical lines. We start in the middle, we work to the outsides, we over direct in the corners here, and that allows us to be able to create that weight on that opposite side for working with fringe as well. So when we look at then the hair above that arc shape, we're going to be working with a lot of swing cutting. So you're going to see us really move the hair around from the back to the front, creating that length. Now this would be your traditional front and center. So there's a lot of just, it could be more one length, the taper underneath. But when we move into the haircut that was done in our core cutting, we start seeing some transitions, some rounded layers, some more pieciness that happens. And so I'm going to take you into a version of that as well. So you can see here first the arc shape that happens. Knuckles are to the head. We're razoring straight down, creating that softness through the nape area, and we work with it in 5 sections. We're then going to clean up or soften any areas along the neckline, and then we begin working with that next section that falls over top. So we start to bevel underneath, creating our line, and then we'll begin to swing cut. We always work the head as it's a whole. So anything above the top of the ears, we'll then start taking our partings all the way around, as you see here. And where Wayne's hands are right now is where we're going to start creating that softness through that back section, creating our rounded layer. So, or an up blend. And this goes up into the black zone and then takes us through the front on that top green zone. And then we can start working through the side sections and blending. We'll create a frame. We're going to create some fringe, and we're going to do some separation with our razor, including some up blending as well. So I'm going to stop my share here. As I shared, go ahead and make sure you're in presenter or speaker view. I'm just grabbing one thing that I misplaced today, and she may be downstairs or hiding. Nope. I was looking for my zone head and I must have missed it this morning. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to begin working with our front and center, but we're going to do it more pixie style. So it will be starting out like a traditional front and center, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to begin working through some of the rounding layers and really creating some of that softness that we see in those pixie haircuts. So what I've done here is I'm taking my comb, and I just want you to be able to see right where this comb leaves the head. So right about where my ring finger is there is right where it starts to leave the head. That's where I'm going to start my arc. And that's pretty traditional, is right around the occipital bone. You can take it higher if you like. And then what you can do is tip the comb just below the ear. That will help give you a nice arc shape. Do you ever have a day where just the parts don't seem like they want to work well? That's what's happening here. Okay, so I've got my first section. We'll go ahead and comb that one out of the way so you can see the nice parting that I have here. I'm going to try to get that really nice and clean. And then on the opposite side, all I have to do now is I lay my finger on that spot. There's the bottom of my ear. And I'm going to take that arc shape up. Yep, I'm struggling today with these sectioning. Okay, so now I've got my nice arc shape. So the one thing I want to watch here is I really want to make sure that I don't take a sharp triangle parting. I really want this to be a nice arc shape. And the reason for that is because otherwise it just gets too sharp. So I want to use my protein cream here. Protein cream is really going to help not only protect the hair while I'm cutting, but it is also going to help protect my tools. It keeps the blades from wearing down as quickly. And so that's going to really be a big help. So we're going to start out here using our razor. And when I hold it, I want to hold it with my thumb, my finger, and just kind of wrap my hands around. You can also see me holding it like a pencil or like a spoon, and however it is comfortable when you're creating, because it should feel like an extension of your fingers. So we're going to start in the middle here. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to take that first line out. And I want to cut this fairly short, but I also want to leave some fringe. So we're actually going to cut more of a concave space or concave layer. So I'm going to start out knuckles to the head. And then as I get to the bottom, I'm really going to scoop it out because I want to see some of that nice fringe. So when I go to the next section, I'm taking the section just to the left of it. I'm going to turn her just this way so that you can see. And How did you escape? Had a little escape artist here. Okay, so with that, we're going to take our next section, so always in that vertical. And I can see my guide from the previous section. So my knuckles are to the head, my razor or blade, and I'm going to turn this way just so that you can see. But as I come down, see how I'm scooping that line out. I'm not worried about it if it's not right at the bottom, because I'm going to come back and work on that later. Now, I'll then go to the opposite side. And again, we're drawing this in. I'm using the previous section as my guide. Knuckles are to the head, straight down, and then as I get to the bottom, I'm going to really scoop it out so that I can maintain those pieces along the bottom. We then over direct in the corner. Again, we're going to go ahead and straight down, but then as I get to the bottom, I'm kind of beveling and scooping that line out. Now I can always go back and cut that shorter, but if I cut it too short now, what happens is then I end up with no insurance and, could have no fringe later. So you're always better off leaving that little bits of extra length in those areas, and you can always clean them up later. So now I'm over directing on that last section, again, straight down towards the head, but then when I come back to that bottom, I'm working to bring that out. So now I have that fringe line. You can see where my shorter pieces are. And if you take a look, it gives me that automatic line. Now, what I love about this as well is if I was to lift this, you can also see, let me see if I can get up under here. So you can see where that line comes short to long just by creating that perfect angle. So I get that shape on both sides. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our next section. So I'm going about 1 inch, and then I'm reaching the top of the ear here. So the next section that I get to is going to most likely be above the ear. And I'm following the same line that I had before. So I'm going to work top of the ear, and if I feel like it's not arced enough, I'm going to fix that too. So I'm really struggling parting today. I'm not sure what my challenge is. Monday morning. And the deeper that you want that line to live in the front is going to be how that arc rolls too. So if you want that to be a really nice deep angle in the front, you need to have that arc shape really work for you. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to find where that center is. Now, in the world of front and center, I have two choices. I can take my guide to the shortest piece, or I can even drop that guide below it when I start working horizontal. We're going to work slightly below it because I like the softness that it's going to give, especially as we go into our rounded layer. So again, I could take that right to the length, or I can go slightly past it. I am going to work right on top of the hair rather than underneath. Working on top is going to give me a little bit more movement that's going to push the hair out. If I go underneath, it's going to bevel under and it's going to turn the hair underneath. I want as much softness as I can possibly get here. So I'm working on top. It'll kick out just a little bit. Now what we're going to do is use that piece as our next guide. So when we work with front and center, we gather all of that section in front of that second knuckle. And now I'm going to go ahead and take my razor into that just behind it. And as my blade moves, you can see I'm really taking nice long movements. And I'm moving and swinging that line out. And don't be worried if you are like me and you have small hands and all of a sudden you drop it. I just pick it back up and keep going. So now we go to the opposite side. Same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and push all that hair over. I want to avoid kind of taking it this way, because if I push too much, I'm going to create too many layers. So I want to keep it down, but I want to push it across. So now what we're going to do is we're going to swing opposite. So we're going to come long movements, swinging that razor or that section as I'm cutting. So now I start to see that length that happens in here, creating that nice angle through the front. And we're also then going to probably have a little bit of asymmetry, because that's what happens when I'm not standing directly behind. And that's okay too, because I can always go back and take more off. And then to create with this pixie look that we're going for, see how I have all that nice fringe and wisp here? I can go back and clean any of that off that I need to. To work in through the rest, I'm not going to work through the length, because I'm going to go ahead and start cutting in my layers. So what I'm working with is high point of the head. So I'm still treating the head as a whole, but we're going to connect it in a different way. So I want to find the high point of the head, which I'm a little shy, just to behind the ear. And we're going to work with our layers just like we did in the back when we created that nape. We're going to work with what we call an upblend or a rounded layer, and making sure the hair stays consistently wet or dry. Especially here, I have quite a lot of color going on in here, so wanting to, just like textured hair, like to make sure it stays consistent. It's okay to cut wet or cut dry, but if we can do it consistently. So we're going to be working with this up-blended rounded layer. So what I want you to see right here is that line. If I work with it, you can see it kind of goes out on an angle. If I take my rounded layer from the shortest piece, it's going to be much shorter than if I started up here. So depending on where you want that layer in the black zone to sit will determine where you start that rounding. So for instance, I don't want it to be super short, so I'm going to start at the top of my guide from below. I'm going to place my blade to the ceiling, and as I'm cutting, I want really soft movement. So I'm taking long strokes with my blade. I am picking it back up, but my hand is basically rounding this shape. So you can see why if I had started lower, it would be much shorter. So with that, we're going to go ahead and work all the way across. And with that, we're going to go ahead and work through, and you can see how nice and soft that is right through the top. So, and I could go shorter with that, or we can keep it a little bit on the longer side. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to work to the section behind it. And then we're going to go ahead and work all the way around. So again, my hand is moving with it. And with that, we're going to go ahead and we're taking that layer through at the same time. So working with my blade up to the sky, soft layers all the way around. And so you can see how soft and that movement is as well. So just like we did in the nape section, we're going to go ahead and work from side to side. You can complete one full side and then work to the other side, or you can work back and forth. Sometimes I like to work more of the back and forth, because when I go from left to right, I can really see how that center is starting to lay and really make them consistent. So again, I can see where my guide is from my previous section right behind. And then I'm going to go ahead and work with my blade up to the sky and really nice softness all the way around. So keeping that nice and soft, you can start to see that really nice shatter that is happening. We'll go ahead and finish our last section on the right. And so I'm over directing here in that corner as well. And then we're going to go ahead and continue our rounding. So with that, we create that nice softness. So you can start to see where my lines are really happening. That weight is starting to settle in here as well, and we're maintaining all that softness. So really, when I'm working with any sort of short haircut or pixie cut, I really like to keep the softness there, because as that softness settles in, I can always firm up areas. But if I go in with my scissors, sometimes it's too firm, and then I end up with that softer line. So with that, we're going to go back here and we're going to take that next section. And so I'm over directing this all the way across. So I'm going to put this way so you can see it this side. So over direction, working all the way across, get my comb out of the way, and my hand continues to round as I work up. As I work to the top. Now, the one important thing I want to make sure that I do, and I'll check this, is that when I am working with a rounded layer, I need to make sure that as I reach the top, that the line across the top becomes horizontal. And so the way we can check that is if I take this horizontal section across the top, see how that becomes nice and horizontal across the top? So I don't want to end up with the line coming up on an angle. So I don't want it to work short to long here. I do want to have more of a horizontal line. The reason for that is if it's too angled in that crown, what's going to happen here is it's going to end up creating more of a weight, and you're not going to get quite the softness there that you see. So with that, you're getting a lot of that movement through the top, and this is looking really good. So I will get a little more water down here in this base. And we'll come back and we're going to clean that up later. So we've created our nape. We have created our horizontal swing. And now we have done our rounded layers to keep that nice, and so more of a longer pixie that we're creating here that falls in the front and center. You can of course go shorter with this as well. And now what we're going to do is we're going to start creating our lines through the top. So what I want to do is I want to start using this crown area for my length. So what we're going to do is we're going to work above our ridge lines. And we're going to go ahead and utilize that top section to start moving across. So we're going to be working from ridge to ridge. So this will be important where we start to discover where that ridge line is. So I know if I lay that comb flat and I tip it in, I'm right on where my ridge line is. Don't worry about this length yet. We'll come back in and we're going to work with that. And what we are going to do is we're going to use that shorter length from the top that we just created, and that's going to be where we start working in through our length. Now I'm going to create this to be more of a symmetrical finish, so that we can be able to, we'll work into some asymmetry later. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to work again with this razor. So we're starting here really nice and short to long as I go out to the front. We're going to work across the top. So I'm working in vertical lines, horizontal to myself. So as you can see, I'm working across the top of the head, but I'm taking lines across that way. So as a right-handed cutter, I'm going to stay on the left side of my guest, and I'm going to be working short to long. So I'll gather all of that hair underneath in front of my second knuckle here. The blade is facing to the sky, and I'm shattering that line all the way out. Now again, if you lose part of it, just pick it back up. It's no worries. And we're going to go ahead and continue that across the top, making sure that I reach the other ridge line. Now this could become an asymmetrical type look. If we were to do that, you're going to see how we can move directionally across the top in a later haircut. So just keep that in mind here, that that could be an option. But today we're going to go for more of a symmetrical, so they can, because they're a flipper, they want to work with both sides. They want to be able to wear it both directions. So we're going to go right into the center. So again, really working to create that softness all the way across through the top. And you can see all that movement that's starting to happen. It's like, wow, you can really, that dark versus the light really works. Now with that, we want to start creating our length through the side. So I am going to find the side ridge where we took that layering to. And now we're going to start working in more of a diagonal movement. So I'm going to go ahead and take my comb on a diagonal, and I'm just going to get this section out of the way. So now we're going to work with this length here, finding the shortest spot. I'm going to capture it all in one piece, just like we did before. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shatter this line all the way across and down. So now you can see that length coming in longer. When we go ahead and take down that last section, you can reach it out a little bit more of a 45. And now we can go ahead and swing. Again, really taking long movements. This hair is very straight, so it's going to be really important that I get some nice softness. The only place I would really have to be mindful is if that guest had really fine hair, then I might not be able to get that shortness or that textured with it, because it might not support it. But even there, some of that soft movement with the razor is going to be fantastic, because it's really going to help the hair move and lay the way you want it to. So with that, we're going to go ahead to the other side. See how once I lay that down, now you can see that longer hair that's living over top of it. Really nice and soft. Now on the opposite side, we find that ridge line again. And if you find a couple of pieces that grew while you were sleeping on the other side, don't worry about it. And then we're going to go ahead and take, again, those diagonal partings are coming from the back of the head. So I always want to make sure that we're connecting and treating that head as it's a whole. So as you can see, I'm going to gather on the opposite side. All right. Really finding where that section is going to come from. And now I'm shattering that line all the way down through the front. We're going to go ahead and take the second section down. Again, I'm drawing that line all the way across the back. And this works great here because typically you're not going to have as much weight above those ears. And so sometimes when we let that lay, we end up with, we miss that section and we create that hole there, and I don't want to do that. And then I'll just double check to make sure that there isn't anything that's living past it. So quick recap, where we started out is our arc shape parting through that back, center, left, right, those last two sections being over directed. We then took another section just above it, about an inch, following that same arc shape, swinging to the left, swinging to the right. And then we went ahead and we went in with our rounding. So everything back behind the ear, vertical, vertical, vertical. So we just worked the opposite way. So it was knuckles to the head down, horizontal, and then we went vertical the opposite direction, up blending, up, up, over directing on those corners. From there, we connected through the top, working back to front, and then we went underneath the ridge line and finished creating our length. So from here, it's really all about creating that personalization. So we'll be creating some of that shape in through the front. Now, with this being that curtain fringe is so popular right now, I'm going to go ahead and steal that from our New Earth collection. And when we take a look at how we created that, it's perfect for this haircut. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 turns of the comb, working a triangle section right into the corners of the side ridges. So you want to make sure that you have both of those corners. We're then going to go ahead and take a horizontal section, all the clips and none of them right in my reach. We're going to go ahead and take that center first, and then you'll decide where you want that length to live. I'm choosing right about the nose length, and I'm going to work on top, really taking long movements again, so it's really nice and soft. We then fold over from the right on top. We then fold over on the left. Again, working on top so that we're creating that nice softness. And then we let the next section fall. You'll notice that there's probably not a whole lot to cut here because of the layers that we created. So we're going to go ahead and just center comes down, just creating that extra softness across the top. We fold over the right side, again, creating that softness up at the top on an angle, and then the opposite side. And then as we come in, she can get that really nice center curtain fringe happening. Looks like I'm a little longer on this side. We want, oh, maybe it's just, no. Let's try that again. And then we're going to go ahead and do the rest of our customizing. So first things first, let's come in and create our fringe or our frame. So I'm just going to push this hair out behind the ear, and we're going to go ahead and look at the eye, the cheekbone, the lips, the jawline. Those are usually areas I like to accentuate. We're going to go in for the eye because we really want to create some nice softness. We're going to go ahead and take some vertical piecing. So what I'm doing is just taking my razor in, working to create some nice separation. I'll repeat that over the top layer here, working in just to create that nice soft separation in between. And then we're going to repeat that on the other side. So we're going to come in, we're going to do our frame first. So we're just working on that hair that lives right behind the eye. We went ahead right at the eye level, right at that corner of the eye the first time. So that's where we're going to start our second one. And I'm going to take off that little corner that I left a little longer, or maybe she likes it that way. And then we're going to go ahead in with our vertical piecing. So again, I'm just holding it like a pencil, just going in vertically to separate. We'll also take that section right over the top. And we're going to go ahead and then we've got that nice softness. So what do you guys think of that? For first, you like that? All right, so now what we can do is we can come back in, we can take in any of that final neckline, and you can come in vertically if you like. And so sometimes I like to come in a little bit at a time and just place a light bit of pressure along the neck on top of that razor. That way I can create that nice softness there. And even in through that side, I want it to really kind of fold around. So I'm just scooping my razor a little bit across that neckline. And I'll do the same thing on the opposite side. So I'll want that to see where it's going to lay. And then I'm going to come in and I'm really going to scoop that line around on the top. It's a little harder on a mannequin head because they don't have, the skin isn't soft like when you're on a human. But if you kind of put a little bit of scooping into that motion, you can get that really nice soft line there. It looks really pretty. And it can be as soft as you like or as long as you like. You be the creator there. And what I like here is that she can still wear it to the side. She can move it around from one direction or the other. And the rest of it, I'll go in when it's dry. So for what I'm going to do for styling here, and then if you want, while I am drying this really, really quick, think of some questions or ahas you might have picked up there, and then we'll go in with some questions. Let's see. I think I'm gonna go in with my blowouts. So we're gonna start with our primer. And I'm gonna do just a really light blow dry. I don't wanna do any big round brushing or anything. I want this to be nice and easy. We're gonna use our memory foam. So the light foam really helps for long-term memory, giving nice slip if I do choose to use a round brush. And we're gonna push it over to the side a little bit. I am kind of a partial to the side thing. I don't know why. Habit. And then what we're gonna do is I wanna use a little bit of my jump. And I want to show you a trick with this too. If ever you get in a position where it doesn't want to spray for you, and this works really well with the hairsprays too, it just sugars that happen. So if you take the top and you twist it a little bit and then push it down as north, back, south, east, oops, to the side as I spray it, oops, I hit my computer, and then to the west. So north, south, east, west, tip them 4 different ways. It will almost always work. The other thing with jump is the molecules don't like each other. So if you shake it and shake it and shake it and shake it, they build up in the bottle and then sometimes they don't like to come out. So it's one of my favorites to use, especially wherever I want to get that root lift right up at the top. But I discovered that long time ago because I'm a shaker. I like to shake my hairspray and spray it. And then I realized that because I was over shaking it, it was not cooperating. So we're gonna take a quick light blow dry here just so we can really shake her out and see it. So if you have questions, pop them in the chat box. Now's a good time. We're just gonna do a light blow dry with my as I and even kind of pushing it out to one direction and then the other. The more you can move the hair around when you're drying it, the more movement the hair is going to have when it's finished. All right, so let's see what we've got here. Go ahead and brush her out a little bit. Really check her out. But I would say, 75% of the haircut you're going to do when it's wet. And then once you've got that laid in where you want it, you can really start to see where you might need to adjust it when it's dry. And I love the way this is looking. I just want a little bit more softness through the front. So we're going to come back in and we're going to use our RZ blender. She has got a lot of hair. So what I want to do is kind of take it in on the angle, which I'm really liking it. And then we're going to work in through that front area. So I'm going to take that blade on an angle and I'm going to really kind of scoop it up a little bit, breaking this up even more. So we're going to take it on that angle. We're going to go ahead and lay it in on that angle, and then I'm scooping it out so that the razor edges are going to blend that together, blend it so that it's nice and soft. But I'm getting that nice separation that I need. So vertical section on an angle, and then scooping that line out. Really starts to give that airier feel to it. In through that side section, same thing. We're going to come in on an angle. We're going to scoop that line up and out, helping that to kind of kick out a little bit. And then for our finish, let's get in here with a little bit of maybe some taffy whip. We'll start out with our texture spray, because that'll give me some nice lift at the root area. So I'm just gonna work to give that explosion of volume. Oh yeah, there's some nice texture. Even through those ends where maybe they're too soft. And then we're gonna go ahead in with our taffy whip. So this is one I think it's a little bit has been forgotten lately. Oh, and it's not even open. Good job, Dawn. All right, take that seal off. And I want to just use a slight amount here. So just maybe a pea size for this shorter hair. We're going to go ahead and really emulsify it through and really start to squeeze that line through so we can really create the nice softness and shape. There we go. Let those little blondies show, giving it some nice texture. And a nice airy textured finish. So we got lots of movement, lots of shape. What do you guys think? Good? We like it? Were there any questions there at all? Let me check the chat box here. Can you recap connecting the back rounded layers to the black zone? Absolutely. So when we work with our layers, you have your black zone that's going to be right here, high point of the head, right into that ridge line. Your rounding, when you start to work up through the top, that 1/2 inch of the top then becomes your guide for the green zone. So that's where you then start to work in through the top. From there, there is a slight disconnect that happened underneath that ridge line when I created this line. So it doesn't really connect. and that's okay. When I check back, I can see where that line is and make sure that it lives in appropriate proportion. So we'll be able to see that a little bit more. But yes, so you're taking the nape. We then created a horizontal guide, and then we worked in through that rounded layer. We took a 1/2 inch of the black zone, we moved it forward, working side ridge to side ridge, working from one side to the other in a vertical shape. So everything was going straight through the front. And then from there, we went under the ridge line, connecting our sides, connecting that opposite side. And then we did create that bit of that curtain fringe. So if she wanted, she could wear that more center, or she can really start to push it to one side or the other. So she's got a lot of different things she can do with it. We created that bit of a frame, and then we worked in with some of our personalization with our separation. So it looks great. Like it. All right, so let's take a look at a little bit shorter haircut, and we go into the crop, because this is where you really start getting into the pixie. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen again here. So some things to note here when we're taking a look at the front and center, just as a quick recap, is you can create a weight line simply by taking that first guide that we created right after we created the nape. We can draw everything to that line, creating a solid weight line, or we can start to up bevel like we did and create that rounded layer, then creates more softness or more layered look. So in this instance, we created more of a layer. For classic front and center, we elevate, but we don't create any layers. So I would just take down more sections and keep swinging that razor around until I've cut all the hair. Higher elevation results in a softer perimeter, which is what you see here. Because we created that up blend, it softens everything so you don't get a harsh line here in the back. And you can lose the perimeter line if you elevate too high. So because I didn't want that, that was perfect because it's a nice soft transition. But as I rounded it, we don't really have that line there. So it's creating shape, but no line. So now let's move into the crop. So when we do the crop, we see so many different variations of it. We can see more asymmetry where you've got longer areas on one side. You might see really, really short layers that are completely uniform, like on the right. You might have a little bit of disconnection that happens. So you're going to see all kinds of different variations. You see it cut up around the ear. You may see some soft on the ear. And the way that we begin creating any crop is always going to be starting in the black zone. So we're going to start by creating that black zone layers. We then take a small part of that black zone and we push it forward, just like I did it in the front and center, to create those layers through the top. And then from there, we're also going to connect through the blue zone. So you can see that we can start sculpting the hair, and then when we're all finished, we'll go around and do the perimeter. It's a little bit different. So when I was in school, we learned to go back in and cut around the ears, cut all of that section short, and then go back in and do our layers. And what happens is it creates very harsh weight around those areas. So by creating the interior first and then going back around and creating the perimeter, it's much softer. So here you can see we start in the black zone. He's working in that horizontal portion or center of the black zone. And then we round the corners, which I will show you. And then he's working through the top. So he's creating this first initial across the part line. From there, he's working all the way across the top. It could be straight or could be directional. We're going to see both today. And then from here, he's going to start taking a section or a horseshoe piece of 1/2 inch of all the way around, and we're going to use that to connect all the way around the sides. So we sculpt all the way through the sides, so some areas will become shorter, but you be the guide and create that. There's movement happening here, so some of it he's working completely vertical, and then some of it he shifts in and working on a diagonal. And I'll show you how to do that as well. And then we start to carve out and work through the perimeter line. As you can see, he's cutting out in number 7, he's cutting out right in around this space here. And I will show you that today. It's a little more difficult on a mannequin head, but anytime you have any of that little fuzzy hair, or maybe it doesn't really have any strength there, by cutting it tight around that section, you can actually open up the eye and create some strength in that area. And that happens a lot with curlier texture. Cleaning up the neckline and his technical personalization. So from here, fringe work, doing some of that frame across the front. We'll see that too. Some upblending with the blender. And here are some other examples. So this one gives you a little bit more asymmetry. You're going to see a lot longer fronts. You're going to see some disconnection happening, and I'm going to show you both of them today. So here, some severe disconnection as we work everything below the ridgeline is nice and short, and then we almost have 2 separate haircuts going on, because then we would work through the black zone, the green zone, and then we would shape the perimeter. So with that, I'm going to stop my share. I'm going to get rid of my chat box here. Oops. I'm not sure how I ended up there. Okay. There we go. All right. So let's start. Remember which ones these are. More of a traditional crop. So when I start working with this one, we're going to work more of a uniform crop, and I'm going to work kind of quickly because I want you to see how we shape and sculpt it, and then from there we're going to do a little bit more unique finishes. So again, I'm working with my protein cream. Protein cream is that protein and moisture balance. It's really going to help to protect my tools, as well as it's protecting my shears from wearing down. And we're going to work with a blend of razor and shear. So the first things first is I need to find the high point of the head. So right where that comb balance is, be nice. Up a little bit higher here, and it lands right about behind the ear. And we're always going to begin our first part of the haircut. We're going to work with the razor because I want softness in the crown area, even if I'm going to switch into my razor. So there's certain areas where I'm almost always going to choose my razor, usually in the nape or anywhere around the ears, because I like that to be a little bit softer. So the first section that we're going to find here is going to be right in the back of the crown. So as you can see, I've got a horizontal section. It's no wider than my blade. And when we get into the corners, that'll take care of the rest of that black zone. But to start, I don't want to have any of that. I want to keep it as narrow as the blade, because otherwise it's just going to fall out and I'm going to lose the tension there and it's not going to lay quite right. So we're going to go fairly short. I'm going to take fairly long movements here, and I'm just working until I clean that area through. So I've got that nice soft section behind, and I'm going to work directly behind it. There's going to be about 3 sections here. We're going to do the same thing here. We're just taking that long movement kind of deliberate. And then the last section reaches right to the back of the ridge. So again, creating that softness. And now when I get into my corners here, this is where we stopped right at this ridge line, which is basically where that comb tips in. And now I'm going to come into the corner. So I'm going to lift that up. I can see the guide from my previous section. I'm going to take those nice long movements. And you may only get 2 sections in the corners versus the 3 that you had originally, and that's okay. But knowing where your ridge line's super important. So pick that next section up. I can see the guide from my previous. I usually like to pull my fingers just slightly higher than where that's going to live because then I can see. And so now I've gone ahead and I've got that nice black zone created on my right. We just have to complete it with the corner on the opposite side. So again, I'm going to take horizontal with the ridge line, straight up, comb out of the way, shattering that line all the way up through the top. And I always kind of do this section like slow and steady wins the race, I guess, because I would rather get more softness here if I want it than having it too firm and not getting enough movement here. So you can already see that that has a lot of great movement through the top. So we're going to switch over to our shear, and I'm going to choose my 6-inch contour. We do have the 7-inch contour, as well as we have the 5 3/4 blade, which is a little shorter. And depending on preference, to some degree, is how I choose them. This contour blade, one of the things I like about it is it does have a little bit more weight right here in that center. So if you're newer to a swivel blade, it's actually easier to control. It does have a teardrop thumb, which is really nice because your thumb's actually flat. It's not round. So there's less play in here as well. So for my thumb, I'm not creating any stress on it. The blades are honed at 45-degree angles. So whether you're left-handed or right-handed doesn't really matter. They work for both. But just the way that it's set, middle finger over thumb, is perfect because it's not creating any stress in the wrist. And literally, if you take your middle finger to your thumb and then you move it over to your ring finger, which tends to be where those are sitting, it actually creates more stress here in the wrist. So with that, I get a lot more comfort and a lot more longer wear out of my wrist for long term. So we're going to go ahead and start working with this one. We're going to be with our shear this time. And I'm going to start working a little bit. Actually, no, I'm going to keep it straight. So we're going to work vertical sections across the top again. But this time I'm working with my shear. Now I am a left-handed cutter, so I'm working back to front, which means that I'm going to stand on the left-hand side of my mannequin head here. If I was cutting the hair short to long, which we do sometimes do maybe in a longer haircut, I would actually stand on the other side. My shears, I'm walking, just my thumb is moving, and I'm working underneath that section. That's going to help maintain some softness. I'm still getting a firmer line here than I would if I was using the razor, but it's still going to be soft because it's going to push short to long. So to keep moving here, I'm going to work across the top. I can see my guide from my previous section. I gather everything in front of my second knuckle. I'm working underneath my hand and I'm working across and working short to long. Now the cool part here is if I wanted this to stay longer through the front, the shear will still allow me to get that nice angle where a traditional stationary shear wouldn't. So for instance, as I'm moving here, I could continue to work this line much longer if I needed to. So you can see I've got that quite short up through the top, but I did leave the length here in through the front. So I'm not cutting it completely short. Now, I'm going to move to my razor on the side sections. You could, if you like, use your shear though. And I'll show you how to do that as well. So I think sometimes people think that, you know, once we train them with razor that you can't ever use a shear, and you can. So I'll start here on my right. And so I'm going to use that same connection, that shorter piece from my green zone will then become vertical for my vertical sections all the way around the head. Now, in the front, I will always over direct here. But see, I can only get so long, and then it's gonna end up not as soft. So I do have to make sure that that top is short enough to be uniform all the way around. Now, if I'm using my shears, I still have my knuckles to the head, and I can still work that line down. I don't like it as much because I like it to be softer, but I can do it. So we'll go ahead and work with our razor here, choosing some vertical sections. Again, I'm using that top section as my guide. Knuckles are to the head, and I'm working with my line all the way down. So we're going to continue that all the way around the head. And so when I get to the back, many times I prefer the razor just because it maintains more softness to it. But you can, of course, if you or your guest prefer it, use your razor or use your shear. Behind the ears, I like to make sure that I over direct behind the ear as I'm getting down to the corner, because I'm going to start sculpting this hair as I'm working. So which means I'm going to over direct here in this corner. I'm closer to the head, and now I'm rolling my knuckles out of the way so that I can sculpt this around the neckline. So I'm doing it all at once. There's no disconnection here, so I just have to be mindful of how much length can I carry and still get it as short as I need to. So that's where that disconnection will start to come into play. But I want to leave this as traditional as possible so you can start seeing that shape coming in. So I'm just working all the way around the head using the previous section from the black and the green zone as my guide. Knuckles are still to the head. Now I'm working closer and I'm following the shape of the head. I am leaving that length on that bottom longer just so that I have some nice shape. And I'm going to come over to this side so that I can show you a different angle. So again, working all the way around. Don't expect to, if you can't pick all that up at once, that's okay. So as I'm taking this down, again, sculpting through the nape area, and then kind of pulling that blade out again through the top. So you can start to see the shape is settling in. And then let's just suppose we want to start shifting this a little bit and creating more of a direction to the front. I'm still going to work with more of a uniform cut. I just want to change the direction of the front a little bit. So as I get around to this side, I want to over direct this last part behind the ear before I move in there. We're going to go ahead and reserve some of that length behind the ear. So again, just over directing. You can always cut it shorter, but if you do take that in, you're going to be able to keep that nice wisp around the corner. So now let's say I want that direction to move a little bit more towards the face for more of a side part, still nice and short, but we're going to push everything forward, and then I'm going to use that to make my next section. So I'm going to go ahead and take, here's my guide from my previous. All I'm doing is I'm working it more towards the face. So you can see it's coming in on an angle. So you're just shifting the direction a little bit. Still keeping it nice and short, still keeping it uniform. There isn't any disconnection. I'm just keeping it a little bit more directional. So now you can start to see all of that line. Don't mind that little guy because I'm just going to take that right off. And we have the last section here, and it can even take in with it a little bit of that green zone because I can see where that guide is on both sides of it. And now I might even start pushing that towards the face. So now that we've created the black zone, we create the green zone, we then connect all the way around. So you're just taking a bit of the hair from the previous guide, using it to connect the next. So now what we can do is we can start working through to create some piecing, which is just going to help to create that nice separation in through that side. So I'm using my razor on a vertical and just sculpting in through that front. I like the way this is looking here, so I'm just going to pick up and piece. So what I'm doing is I'm pinching that section and I'm sculpting it all the way around. So as I come back to that front, same thing. Pick that up. Now we're just going to keep walking around the head. So I'm just working more vertically to get that nice separation, but then you can use your horizontal on top just to soften the edges on the top. Now, if your guest likes it more severe and they want more of a sharp line, you can absolutely come in here with your scissor and work left to right and clean that up. But I like when my hair is short, I like a lot of that little wispy texture. And then we're going to come back in on the opposite side. We want to mirror the opposite. Or maybe you want it to be a little longer, and that's okay too. And now I can come in and work my vertical. And then we have the fringe left. So from here, I even have, don't be alarmed, like whenever you're cutting the hair, if you are directing your scissor and see how I got that nice long piece, I might like it like that. But if I go and cut that off right away, I can't really see what the end result is. And so sometimes it's better to leave that perimeter and leave those little pieces hanging because you can always take them off. But if you cut them off right away, then there isn't anything there to work with. So we're going to keep this nice and soft in the front, but you could use your scissor here as well. And we're going to go ahead and just sculpt that fringe out a little bit. And here's a great spot to put in your weaving. So I'll take that horizontal section, lift, break that away. She's looking pretty good. And let's have a little fun here in this top area. And let's do a little bit of vertical upblending. So I'm just taking my blade and I'm working on a vertical. And as I lift the hair, I'm taking that blade up and around. So it helps to just give more separation. Definitely a thing to practice on a mannequin head before you go to a guest if you haven't done that before. But even just scooping up a little bit. So this is what we call upblending. So my comb is held thumb on bottom, first finger on top, wrap the comb around. As I'm lifting, I'm going to do this backwards first. So the blade is facing away from me, and I'm scooping as I'm catching, scooping as I'm catching, scooping as I'm catching. So if I take the blade the correct way, so the blade is up to the ceiling, as I scoop around, I'm just lifting the hair and I'm scooping. And what that's going to do for me is create a lot of lift in that crown area. So, and I love to do that on a shorter haircut like this, because then I can really get some good lift in the crown area. When you try this, try it with the blade facing to the floor first. Get a feel of it, and then you can switch your blade around, because you really want it to kind of scoop around so that you're not taking off that whole section and accidentally cutting something you don't want to. So we'll do one more here right at the ridge line, and we're just going to scoop and bevel right in the front here, scoop and bevel. And then I can see right in here, it's just a little bit heavier than I'd like it. So I'm just going to come in with my vertical blade as well. And another thing with your razor is, if I want that hair to really curve around, I can make it curve around simply by changing how I'm blending it. It's kind of like when we did that fringe on the front and center, really kind of scooping it on top. Now I'm scooping it the opposite direction so that I can encourage it to go the way I want. And this was a huge game changer for me, that when I realized I could be the director of the hair, I realized how much more I could create. All right, so let's give her a really quick little blow dry. We're going to use a little bit of Crave today. And I like the Crave because it is customizable. So we're going to work it a little bit for a wet blow dry. We're going to make sure to get it through those ends. My primer would have been a great addition there also to help make sure that this style is going to last for her all day. And I'm just going to use my hands to blow dry this again. And when we're all done today, I'll make sure to fix them up beautiful and get them. I'm just lifting it up at the base. She has the one. And then we'll use the Crave again before I hit it with the texture paste. But now I want to work this a little bit firmer as I work through it. And I can really get some nice like mohawk type feel to it. By working it more in your hands, you're going to have that stiffer feel to it. But now you've got more of a traditional crop, more uniform blending throughout. Cool. What do you guys think? Good? You like it? Awesome. So we've got the front and center. We have a traditional crop. let's take you guys into more of a disconnected, asymmetrical. We're going to pull out all the stops here. So before I do that, are there any questions that came about? I love it. Seems so much more efficient starting in the black zone. Yeah, definitely when you work on that interior first, you're going to see that you're going to have a whole lot more that's going to happen for you when you can detail that side. You're going to get much softer finish to it. Any questions or anything that came from the last one? You guys are very quiet this morning. Monday morning, just soaking it all in. Okay, so let's get rid of the chat box there. All right, so this next haircut that we're going to do to finish out our day here is we are going to work with more of an asymmetrical cut. We're going to use both shear and razor depending on what we want to see. And I'm going to have you guys help me just a little bit. So there'll be a few spots. I'm going to ask you if you want to see it more, a little bit of sharper edge, or if you want to see a softer edge, etc. And so I want to get a little bit of guidance from you guys. We are going to work asymmetrical. We are going to do some disconnection. And so I'm just kind of reading the hair a little bit here. I really like this longer length that's in front, but I want to get it nice and short too. Do you guys want to see definitely more softer? Thumbs up if yes. Softer, yeah. Let's see. Do we like the wispy necklines, or do we want to see more of a sharp neckline? Anybody? You guys are so easy this morning. All right, I'll just keep going. All right, so we're going to again start in the crown area, but we're going to actually start in a thumbprint corner. So I'm going to find right where the top of the part line is, and I'm going to find a small corner to start with. She doesn't want to stay still till. You ever have those guests that sit in your chair, especially little kids, and every time you like put their head straight and you go to cut it and they go, yeah, and you just keep going. I had one not too long ago. She must have been 5, and it was so cute because she kept doing it, and I had to finally, like when she stood up, I had to straighten part of it because it was tipped to the side no matter what I did. So what I'm going to do here is I'm finding this exactly where the part's going to live. So probably just over that eye. And where I'm going to begin is right in this thumbprint right up at the very top, because that's going to determine my length. And what we're going to do here is we are going to find just that little square section here right across the part line. And I'm going to start this using my razor. And so I'm going to take it quite short here. And that's going to be where we're going to start things. So I'm going to do a combination of some soft across the part line and then some scissor across the top. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to take right where that lives, and we're going to take right across that top here. And I'm going to take it more straight across. Okay, so you've got where I've got that little section that matches just across the part line. Still working from ridge to ridge. I have my shorter section from the top, and I'm going to work more even across the top. I don't want it to get longer. I want it to stay fairly horizontal across the top, because this is going to be the shortest part. So if you can see, it's got a nice soft finish up at the top. Now, because that's right over the part line and I'm still working from ridge to ridge, I want this to start moving directionally. So I'm going to start pushing this on an angle. I want to save that shortness over the eye, and I want that length to come down. And these kind of techniques here has totally changed how I cut hair, because I started to read the hair and look at the shape that I wanted to create, rather than just having everything all be even, because I grew up in a very structured haircut world. So everything had to match, everything had to be perfect, and everything had to blend perfectly. And now I have put kind of all that behind me, and my haircuts are so much better. So when I start pushing this to the direction over this way, I'm now going to start by taking my first angle across the front. So now this section and that little corner here become my guide. So I'm going to go ahead and work with my scissor first. You could use your razor here, but I'm going to walk this out all the way out to the corner, to the longest length. So you can already see I start to get this nice softness over here and the length through the top. Now I'm going to take the next section. Again, I'm only going to work to that side ridge, but we're working from back to front, capturing the hair. Same thing, I'm going to take from the shortest point, and I'm walking all the way out to as far as I can with that longer length. I want to reserve as much of it as I possibly can. Same thing here, I'll take that angle so you can see it's going to the side ridge corner. I'm just moving across the top. Here's my short piece still coming from that corner. I'm walking out to the corner, and I'm not worried if that's too long here, really. What I'm worried about is that it blends from that short to the length, because I really wanted to stand up here, but I want to see as much of this length here in the front, but I can take more of that off. So I'm not as concerned about it. Making sure I'm staying to the ridge line. Can still see my short. Walking all the way out to the edge. And you'll notice my shoulder never went up above my head either, so that is always great because I don't have to worry about destroying my shoulders. And I just like to make sure that I'm not going any farther than the ridge line. I can still see where that shortest piece is. And now I'm working from short to long all the way out to the corner. So with that, as that opens up over the part line, you can already see I've got that nice shortness here. I've got that part that's going to really stand up, and it's starting to get short to long on the opposite side. So now what we want to do here is I'm going to take this all the way around and just make sure that once I get my ridge line out of the way, this is where we're going to start that disconnection. So I want to make sure that everything blends through that top. So I'm just double checking, making sure I've got everything where it needs to be. There we go. And now what we're going to do is we're going to get all of that out of the way so that we can create our disconnect. Okay, so this is not going to connect to anything underneath. It can be really, really short. It can be buzzer short if that's what you are wanting to create. One thing to always remember when we do this, though, is that that ridge line is really important, because if you're disconnecting underneath the ridge line and you don't go high enough, too many times people get too afraid to go that high up under the ridge line, and then it's still too bulky right up in this corner. So that is something that we do want to make sure we address. Now I'm not taking this super short here just because the mannequin heads don't really like to play quite that well with it, but I am going to go knuckles to the head. Be aware of the hair if it's going to stick up. You might not want to cut it that short. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to follow that all the way around. Now I have no connection to the top here. That top is going to lay over the top of all of this. So, and this could be nice and short. I am going to take it right around the ear. But we are going to go knuckles to the head, over directing it in those corners again. I just like to make sure that if I want that wispy softness in that corner, that I can still have it. If I take it too short, then I lose out on it. We're going to go ahead and take all of that length off here. Again, working vertically, knuckles to the head. This should be the easiest part of the haircut. Now on the right side where I want it to start coming in more on an angle, find my ridge line. I am going to start doing what we did before. I could take this completely straight if you're working to go completely straight, or if the hair doesn't allow, you might need that extra fullness on the side. Or maybe you just want that side all to be longer. But we're going to start shifting that line again, just like we did in that first one. So this is going to be that really short side on the left, and on my right, not quite as short. But again, super important that I know it's really hard to see that light. Let's see if I can get her a little closer so you can see a little bit better. Maybe that's better. But what I want to do here is I want to start taking this on an angle. So once I have this cleared behind the ear, now we're going to start pushing this in on an angle. So I'm going to start taking it towards the face. I'm just directing it a different way, that's all. So now we're working directionally. Directionally towards the face, knuckles to the head, but still keeping it nice and tight underneath the ridge lines. Now, if you wanted that last little bit maybe to stay a little longer, I'm going to over direct this. And now this is going to be a little bit longer here, but when I pull this over the top, it's going to start to blend more into that side. So now what we need to do is, once we've gotten all of that out of the way, now we can start adding in our detail. So I am going to come through, and I don't want this to be exactly this length, but I do want it to be closer. So I'm just going to take my razor and I'm going to work with really soft movements across the front, just to really blend it so that it looks like it was nice and soft there. We're going to go ahead and take and clean out behind the ear here. So just taking my razor, working through. She's looking good. And then on the opposite side, we're going to have some stragglers here, and that's okay, because I'm going to go ahead and we're going to take that right around the ear. So again, I'm going to leave this top length a little bit longer And I'm kind of pushing it to the front so I can get that little bit of scoop around the front. And then we're going to go ahead and clean this out behind the ear. So again, I'm just going to make sure that everything is blending at this point. I'm loving the way this is starting to really look. And with this, because this hair pokes out so much, I'm going to start trying using my razor first, and then I can clean it out with my shear. But I'll use my razor first because if I can get this around the ear as much as possible and still leave that nice softness, I'm going to. So you can see how nice and clean that still looks. And I'm just scooping it around the ear because I want to maintain that little point there. And we're going to go ahead and work around that side. So I've got that left side nice and clean. I have the front side is going to be a little bit longer. We have our disconnect, which is allowing that collapse. Now on the right side, I do have more weight above it. So what I want to do is do what we call an upblend. So I'm going to kind of get my fringe out of the way. So anything in front of that side corner, because I don't want to lose that. But what I am going to do is where this shorter piece underneath here, where right at the tip of where my finger is, and it starts to get really long, I'm going to come in with my razor and I'm just going to do what we call an upblend. So I'm just going to softly blend from short to long, helping that collapse. Plus it'll grow out a lot nicer for me. And then again, just making sure everything is where I want it. We can use some sculpting techniques here. So if I want to create more of that softness across here to really accentuate these nice highlights, I'm just going to pinch. I'm going to sculpt on one side. I'm going to sculpt on the opposite side. So I'm just working along the side lengths of each of these longer pieces. So pinching, sculpting on both sides into the length that we're using. And we can also then come back in, we can do our upblending that we used before. So rolling the razor, thumb on bottom, first finger on top, wrap your fingers around. And right in this corner here, right where I want to see that a little shorter and open that eye up, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lift. And again, I just kind of getting the feel for it. If I'm new at it, taking the back side of the razor. And then once I get comfortable, I'm going to go ahead and really work in so I can see those nice short pieces work through it. Again, we're going to go ahead and do our dry detailing as we go. We're going to check and make sure there's nothing hanging anywhere I don't want it to, like in the back here. So I'm just going to take this around on that perimeter length. So it is kind of like having a second haircut up at the top, just checking to make sure that all of that is laying where you want it. And again, I like to have it as soft as possible because I do like to see those pieces. I just don't want them to be too long. Super cute. Making me want to cut my hair short again. Home bathroom haircut, not happening today. All right, so we're gonna get our primer in here. Let's see, what do we want to use here? You know, I'm gonna use one of my favorites. Is gonna be my Reflect. I don't have any blondies today, so otherwise I would use my Violet smoothing cream, and that's one too that I really have enjoyed doing for pixie cuts too, because when they're nice and short, then kind of fun to be able to give that nice, really softness. But also keep in mind, when people say they want it short, they want it short, and avoid having to recut it 5 times by cutting it short the first time. I know sometimes it's a little scary, but I think short cuts grow out so quickly sometimes that you need to just get in there and get it short. Giving that nice little push up at the top. Flex I love because it's got that nice curve. It's soft. It's not crunchy or crispy. And I have a couple of options here. I could use my texture spray for some lift, or maybe some airlift would be a great one as well. And one of my favorites here for doing some short hair is going to be the taffy wax spray. So just a light mist. You will see it turn white, and that's okay. I'm still 12 inches away. But then when I squeeze it and melt, we call that misting and melting, you get some nice separation in the hair. So you can see where it's nice and short. We had that directional movement toward the front, keeping it nice and clean around the ear, uniform through that back. I still have those nice longer pieces, which become really important for those little things that mean a lot, right? We have that nice lift underneath the support. On the side here, we really started moving that forward movement. We kept it a little longer, a little more asymmetrical. And most importantly, that top section is where we created our black zone here in that corner. We worked across the part line with our razor, keeping it level. And then we started really creating that longer length using our shear. And again, shear, razor, both of them work really well. Just depends on what kind of edge you want to create. Do you want a softer edge? Do you want a firmer edge? And then you decide from there. So with that, let's see what's in the chat box here. Love the forward directional sectioning on the longer side. Yeah, that's so helpful because when we really start to work directionally, you can create anything. And I think that was one of the biggest ahas for myself. So before I close it up, are there any questions or anything at all that I can answer for you guys? Don't be shy. Are you having fun this morning? Enjoying? Awesome. I love it. So, we created some asymmetrical, we created some disconnect. We showed you some more uniform layers as well. So as you get more into that traditional crop or pixie cut, we even showed you into that front and center where we can still utilize that short inversion to the longer lengths, but creating a lot of layers and softness on the interior of it. And with that, you guys, there's so much great education coming your way, and I'm excited as, believe it or not, we're already, working on planning into 2022, and so continuing the virtual classroom as it continues to grow. So tell your stylist friends. I know we had some that couldn't make it today, even though they had signed up. So the recording will be shared with you, and you'll be able to take that with you and watch it again. But don't forget about the Vimeo channel that we have over 200 videos there to be able to watch and learn and continue growing, because if you're green, you grow. If you're ripe, you rot. As well as the Surface Hair website, where it'll take you to the Surface University. You have all your business and goals support planning there as well. And I'm so excited because we have some great education lined up for you. August 2nd, just a couple weeks away. Come join me for some pure color. We'll be talking about some fall formulas. I know it's early and nobody wants to hear fall coming, but it's around the corner. So start getting some ideas with some toning and color correction, as well as some great fall formulas. On August 23rd, I'll be hosting a flawless finishing class, and it'll be from 10 till about 1 when we on Central Time. And tickets are $125. You do get a mannequin head that will be shipped to you, and there won't be any cutting on it, so you'll have it for practice for later as well. But it's a flawless finishing class where we'll be diving into some core principles of blowouts, as well as we'll get into the trend finishing from this collection this year, New Earth. And then I wanted to share with you on November 15th from 9 to 4. I know there's a couple, Sandra, I think you're already signed up for this one, but it's a full day workshop of core cutting. So we'll take you through the full theory. We'll take you through each of the 5 haircuts, and you'll have a mannequin head that you'll be able to work on as well. And so it'll be a great day. So if that's something that interests you, you can register for that now as well. And you'll find it, I've sent it out before, but I will send it out today just so you have it for future. And if you haven't already, we'd love to have you guys at the Global Forum, October 23rd and 24th. We have some great things planned for you. We have cutting, color, finishing, working with fine and thinning hair, working with texture. Daniel Mason Jones is going to be a key speaker there as well, so we're excited to have him, as well as Jessica Domine, who will be another guest artist as well. And then you have Wayne and myself, Lindsay, Sean, and the Surface team there to inspire you and to share with you some great new things for 2022. So we hope that you'll join us. You can still register for that. And it's a great time to get away, I'm sure. Remember that there are only 5 haircuts in the whole wide world. Trends are an exaggeration of the 5 core cuts. And once we own those principles, we can create, through consultation, a personal reflection of that haircut. We consider their hair type, their facial shape, body structure, their personality, and how we can individualize these core cuts for the perfect look. When we work with the system, it inspires creation as well as recreation, so we can recreate those looks over and over. And I know for me, it's made a huge change in the way I cut hair. I used to think I didn't want to be what I called a cookie cutter hairdresser. And I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to learn this system, and I'm not going to be an individual anymore. And what I learned is that by using the core system and learning the principles, cutting in the end result in mind, or cutting in the direction we want the hair to move, and using those techniques, I actually became way more creative, way outside of my box. And so I absolutely have fallen in love with cutting hair all over again. With that, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. If ever you have questions, I know each of you are connected with me on social, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to answer questions or help as I can. So thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye, everybody.